in the first year. We were both shocked, I think, at the success of the show. So in terms of some of the wins that we've had, I mean, just incredible, right? We've been featured in Pod News. We've been featured in Sounds Profitable. I believe
Forbes.
We've been featured Forbes. That's right. Forbes, just casually throw that in there, John. I mean, for everybody who works in podcasting or has a podcast, try and explain it to your boomer parents and good luck. But if you tell them you're featured in Forbes, yeah.
Hello, and welcome to PodBiz, the money behind the mic, a podcast about the business of podcasting. I'm Norma Belenky of NJB Media, a podcast audience development strategist.
And I'm John Kiernan of Podhouse Productions, an all-in-one podcast consultation and editing platform. We're co-hosts on this journey into the world of podcasting as a monetization tool.
Whether you're building branded content, scaling a podcast network, or you're just getting into the podcasting industry, PodBiz breaks down the strategies, tech, and mindset behind podcast success.
We're bringing you insider tips, real talk with industry professionals, strategies that actually work, and talking all about the things that we've seen in the trenches.
So if you're ready to go beyond the downloads and build real impact with your podcast,
then hit subscribe and let's get down to PodBiz.
Welcome to PodBiz. Welcome to our 1-year anniversary celebratory episode. This is Norma Belenky from NJB Media. I am joined by my co-host, John Kiernan from Podhouse Productions. Hey, John.
Hello. And you don't always see me on camera. I've been on camera a couple times, but the behind the scenes stuff, I'm there. You're probably reading emails that are from both Norma Jean and myself. So, all the things in all ways, all the time. So I'm happy to be here having a conversation.
Absolutely. All the things and always all the time. We were both at London Podcast Show. I believe we're both going to be at Podcast Movement in New York. We're on all sides of the pond. And this is our 1-year anniversary episode of PodBiz. Woohoo! We are thrilled that you're here with us today and joining us to celebrate our 1-year anniversary. John and I have come a long way in a year of launching this show. And we are so grateful to every single one of you who have watch the show, listen to every episode, read our newsletter, follow us on LinkedIn, or even just watch the clips.
Yeah, it's been an exciting time. And I think that, when we first started PodBiz, and we'll obviously be diving into this in the full episode here, but I think that when we first started PodBiz, it's like, hey, people start podcasts. You see that there are podcasts in the ecosystem in any industry that you're in. And I think to be able to really see the value that people have been talking about, the value that we've gotten out of it, and just the overall effect and reach of what we've been able to do with PodBiz. I just want to also thank everybody for all the support over the last year or so. Eventually, we're going to be saying over the years, which is crazy. But the fact that it's a full year, thank you guys so much for the support in all ways. So thank you.
Absolutely. And so we first off want to talk about how we got here. So why did we start PodBiz? John, you want to go first? Sure.
So, I think it's interesting when we talk about why PodBiz became a thing and why we started PodBiz, right? I think that for us, there's a lot of different answers. And I think the biggest one, honestly, is, we've been talking to lots of people in the industry for years in different places that we've been in different lives, right? And I think that when we thought about what would it look like if we started a show, or what kind of answers have we wanted over the years, I think the biggest thing for us has always been transparency, right? I think one of the biggest things for us is, as the tagline for the show is, where's the money in podcasting? I think for me, going to a lot of conferences and talking on a lot of different shows and talking to the greater industry, one thing I always value are conversations with people who are very transparent and people who are saying, this is how I got here. These are things that I did that didn't work or did work. And here's how we got here. Here's how somebody in my position on the other side of this camera can go ahead and get similar results maybe. I think that being able to have tangible things and tangible answers to how did you get to where you are, or how can I get to where you are? These are things that we continue to answer. And, not just us, obviously, but the guests that we're bringing on from all these different places, from podcasts to ad networks and everyone, right? So I think that for us starting a show, that was the big thing going into it. And I'm really grateful to be able to look here a year later and be like, I think we're continuing to find success at that. And also to everyone that's been coming on, you guys have been as transparent as can be too. We can ask the questions, but ultimately you're the one that delivers the answers. So, I think that a lot of the people we brought on have been real transparent with that too.
Absolutely. I mean, when I think about why we wanted to start the show, for everybody listening, it's because of you, right? We wanted you to have access to transparent conversations around monetization within podcasting, right? That's always been the goal. And John and I both have a platform background. We both have worked, whether it's CS, marketing, virtual events, explaining new features, how the technology of podcasting works, how to create community, how to market your podcast. We both have a really wide skill set. And so we were like, okay, there's so much that the average person doesn't know, and even that industry insiders don't know. That's why I always try and break down acronyms, right? Like, I don't want anybody to be like, DAI, what's that? Dynamic ad insertion. But I do think it's something where when we're talking about the industry evolving as a whole, when we don't have transparent conversations around monetization, that's when people get left out.
Yeah.
That's when people undervalue their work. That's when people miss the opportunity to go from hobbyist creator to professional media company to I make a living from this to this
Right.
makes my mortgage payment. And so, on the indie creator, that's been really huge. And then I think also from an industry side, right, in terms of some of the larger organizations that have been so generous with their time and expertise, it's really about breaking down how things look on the inside of some of these companies that are leading the industry, right, with creators, with monetization technology, with tools, with how the technology works in terms of in the palm of your hand, with how people are engaging, with audience development metrics. There's so much where we're able to share that expertise with everyone. And there are people who are super siloed in terms of their expertise. We're still early enough that I feel like a lot of people have that general knowledge. But nowadays, there are creative folks who don't know how ad tech works.
Right. And I will also say too, and this is something that's always been very near and dear to me, going to many of these conferences, I feel like there's so much knowledge that you can get, right? So many podcasts, so many conferences. And at these conferences, there's so many speaking sessions, right? For those who have seen Norma, Jean, and I do our speaking sessions on a variety of different topics over the year, I think we continue to have that transparency in the best way that we can with these conversations. And one thing for me has always been, I think when you go to a session, or you listen to a podcast. And this is something they tell you about marketing and growth all the time. If you say something in your title, then you need to deliver on the expectation, whether you're watching a short, whether you're going to a speaking session, whatever the case may be. And I always felt like with a lot of these sessions, a lot of these podcasts, sometimes you get these conversations where it's like, I'm expecting information. I'm expecting something tangible that I can do, or I'm expecting some sort of result from you so I can kind of knock it against what I do. And a lot of the times I feel like for one reason or another, there may be an opportunity there to expand on that. Or you may have people on the panel who don't deliver that information quite as succinctly as you want them to. Maybe it's more like, okay, cool, I'm this person from this company, so it's a marketing opportunity to be here, that kind of thing. Right. And I feel like that ethos has kind of gone into the show that we're doing here, being like, listen, we want to have these conversations. I think an audience deserves to do it, especially if we're in the industry of podcasting and saying, you know what? We're all growing together. As you said, podcasting is still crazy enough in an infancy stage, right? And I feel like every year there's a new thing that we're having a piece of saying, oh, okay, this is the next part, this is the next part, this is the next part. But it's so crazy to think that podcasting is still in its infancy. And I think the ethos of our show is wanting to continue to have those different conversations and really give people something. It's like, hey, I am part of this industry and I can have these action items that I do and these CTAs that I do and really dive in and make my show something to be proud of.
Absolutely. And, I think when we initially launched the show, we'll talk about this in terms of the success of the show later, but I think we really just launched it with the intention that we wanted to share our industry knowledge and talk to people who were successfully monetizing, either supporting creators through a large organization, working with brands as a steward of their dollars on the ad side, working in the ad tech side, or as independent creators. And so I think that that's been a really big one as well. And I want to move into monetization. Where's the money? Here we go. It's right here. What we learned about monetization this first year. So, what I've seen is that ads primarily work in three different, I want to say silos, right? And these different categories of ads work Venn diagrammed with each other throughout the industry, right? So we've got big ads, right? We've got subscriptions and that whole creator economy of subscriptions, whether it's for Patreon, whether it's Substack, whether it's premium episodes on Apple or Spotify. There are a lot of different ways that creators are monetizing with subscriptions. And then we've got branded. So those are kind of the three main areas of monetization that we've seen in the over 50 conversations that we've published here with people who are successfully monetizing in podcasting.
I would agree. I can't give my answer though until you ask me the question.
John, where's the money?
PodBiz is brought to you by Lean and Loaf, our video podcast partner. Because running a podcast is so much work outside of just recording a podcast.
Lean and Loaf handles our entire post-production pipeline, getting everything platform ready. That way we're not chasing files or managing editing timelines every week.
We really recommend Lean and Loaf. It's been phenomenal. We're a two-man team. And so for us, it's been fantastic to have the additional support to focus on the content of the show and the incredible guests we've had on.
And really get down to answering the question that you want to know the answer to. Where is the money in podcasting?
Lean and Loaf is trusted by some of the biggest names in the podcasting industry. So we're in really good company with folks like iHeart, HBO, and Netflix.
If you want to take a load off and take your podcast to the next level, head on over to leanandloaf.com. So I think that with all these different episodes, and even with PodBiz, right? I think we've had exactly what you said. We've seen that there's these different silos of monetization. But, to go back to a couple of different episodes, two of my favorite episodes that we've done on the show have been with Victoria King and with Danielle Bezalel, because I believe that, I'm very much a fan of speaking to companies in the ad tech and having these conversations of what they're doing, where the money is. But I'm always somebody that intrinsically is like, I really want to hear the stories of successful creators too, right? And I'm glad that we merge both those things. And in both those conversations, I feel like with them, they really have been able to target the audience that's going to advertise on their show, right? These are two different kinds of podcasts that speak to a very different audience than a lot of our entertainment podcasts that are out there, right? Or pop culture podcasts or sports podcasts, whatever you want to say. And I think that when you listen to those conversations, they tell you that. And there's a lot of great nuggets of information in there. Hey, there are companies that can't advertise in the traditional mediums because of whatever reason, the topics that they cover, right? Or the products that they sell, right? So in that way, it's like you have to find really strong connections with podcasts that are in that specific niche, target your niche, right?
Yeah.
And I think that those two have been really powerful for podcasts of all shapes and sizes to be like, who ideally is my target audience? Sure, we talk about that, but who ideally is a company, or who are the companies that I think would make really great sponsors for my show? And what angles can I work with my show that can create that influx of income in a way that they might not be able to otherwise leverage?
Yeah. And the two podcasts that you're talking about are Danielle Bezalel's podcast, Sex with DB, which was one of our launch episodes. And she has a podcast all about sex education. She is, I want to say, a sex educator. She has a master's in, I want to say, public health, I think, something like that. And her whole niche is, answering questions that people feel embarrassed or there's stigma around. And she makes six figures from this podcast in direct sponsorship from brands who want access to her audience. And she does it with pretty low downloads. But because it's such a specific niche that has a lot of challenges advertising in traditional ways because of things like keywords and, the lack of sexual content being allowed a lot of the time, she really has a very valuable niche. Victoria King-Meyer, the other example you gave, the chemical show, right? She works directly with large chemical corporations, sets up live events, allows the leaders in that industry to participate in her show. And also, she was very clear, it's not pay to play. She gives direct interviews and she doesn't fluff them up. She says, hey, I'm going to talk about real stuff with you. I was a chemical engineer for a long time. I know this industry. And now, I'm here to create this thought leadership vehicle. And she really has created value for those sponsors. So both of those examples are incredible in terms of the way that independent creators are monetizing around a specific niche. I also really love big ad. I love talking to all the ad folks and nerding out. We've had some incredible guests. We had Giancarlo Bizzarro from Crooked Media. He's been a really big advocate for our show since day one. He's connected us to a lot of guests. And just hearing how, Crooked's strategy in terms of how they've grown has been incredible. We've also had Adam McNeil from Adopter Media. He came on and talked about being a steward of the brand's dollars. And also, everybody thinks when they're talking to ad folks that they must have it figured out. And, they're just really, really dealing with direct brands and it's really high volume or high movement, but there's also a proponent of that role working with large advertisers where and Adam even says this in the episode, he says if they have a bad experience with podcasting, they don't think they had a campaign that wasn't effective. They don't like podcasting as a whole.
Right.
And so everybody across the board is continuing to be an ambassador for the medium itself. And that seems to be a really great theme that I'm seeing. We all are here because we love it.
You also just touched on something I want to bring up real quick too, because since we are in such an infancy stage in podcasting, even though many of us have been in the podcasting ecosystem for a sizable amount of time, right? When you have these advertisers who look at podcasts and advertise on podcasts, Brian said this in his episode from Sounds Profitable. And he was just like, there's a lot of things that the podcasting industry is always in flux of, right? And one of those things is that, in his words, kind of, we're very resistant to change, right? And I think over the years, with how podcasts interface with the ad folk, right? It's always been something where podcasters and hosting platforms and, the larger ecosystem above the creator have been like, hey, here's how we're going to go ahead and classify a download. Here's how we're going to go ahead and classify this metric or this metric, and then we're going to deliver it to you. And a lot of the ad tech is like, well, that's great, but that's not how we work with the larger ecosystem of advertising, right? So I think that, being able to speak to a lot of people from the ad side on the show has really been revealing in terms of where the podcasting industry was and where the podcast industry is going and how both sides have kind of worked together to be like, all right, cool. Well, this is the actual way that, we're going to dive into that. But you're 100% right? If someone advertises on a podcast and they go, hey, we're not getting the return that we want to, it's not like, oh, we're just going to choose different podcasts. It's like, well, podcast is so young that in a lot of marketing and advertisers' minds, they could just say, you know what? They'll throw up their hands and be like, well, podcast advertising isn't all it's cracked up to be. And I hope the episodes that we're putting out and the people we're bringing on highlight how powerful podcast advertising really can be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I definitely love hearing from the big ad folks. Heather Osgood from True Native Media came on and said, she expects a lot of podcasts to have 50,000 downloads a month if they're going to join her network. And so I think for an independent creator, even just knowing those milestones is really helpful.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, John, I want to talk about the hard stuff because obviously it's been a year. It's been a year.
There's no hard stuff.
There's no hard stuff in podcasting, but I do have to say, I think we both went into this with our eyes open. We both have been working in the podcasting industry for several years and we know what it takes to make a great show. So we intentionally batched our episodes from early days. But, obviously it's been a really hard year and we lost Todd Cochrane.
Yeah.
That was hard. I mean, editing an episode of someone who has just passed away. That was such a quick turnaround. For everybody out there who is listening, you can listen to Todd Cochrane's episode. We recorded it only weeks before he suddenly passed. It was incredibly sudden, and we got that episode out that week, really as a tribute to Todd and his legacy building Blueberry. He was an advocate of podcasting early days, and what he did for the industry was incredible. You can hear more about it on his episode.
Yeah, I think that someone like Todd, who's been such an ambassador of the industry for so many years, right? I think to have an episode that we had recorded where, again, he brought up all of this great stuff about where podcasting is, where it's come from. If you know Todd, or even if you don't know Todd, you know the stamp he left on the industry and continues to leave even to now. And being able to have an episode where like, hey, we were able to get someone who really is a true name in podcasting and someone who in, even a lot of our lives or you listening to this right now probably had a deep impact in some way on the way that the landscape of podcasting has been molded or shifted.
Absolutely.
Being able to have an episode with him, it's definitely one of the highlights of being able to do this. You want to speak to people who you think are really good people and really have some value to add. And I think Todd checked those boxes in all the ways.
Yeah. And, we really didn't know what to do, to be honest. For everybody out here listening, for all of our listeners, I know you're not supposed to say that. For you, the one person who's listening in this exact moment on your phone, it was very challenging to make that decision. We didn't know what to do. We had recorded it a couple weeks earlier. We heard about it as soon as everybody else did. It was obviously terribly upsetting. We all knew Todd.
Yeah.
And I realized we'd actually been to conferences on 3 different continents together. He had all these wild stories and he was always just such an advocate for independent podcasters and for the overall industry as a whole. And when something like that happens, you don't know what to do, right? You're sitting with an interview you did a couple of weeks ago. He talks about the entire arc of his career, and you're like, what are we going to do? And so we decided in that moment to pivot our entire production schedule. John made it happen. John turned that episode around in like 24 hours, and we put it out that week. And it's something where it was such a shock, I think, to everybody. And we really hope it just spoke to his legacy. And it was, I mean, you can go back and listen to it. But yeah, that was probably the hardest thing that I'd say we had to encounter this year. Yeah.
I will also say that I remember in a previous place where there were a lot of conversations around YouTube. I remember when YouTube was starting to roll out the RSS feed feature. And there were so many people in the industry on that call with YouTube. And I remember that, Todd was someone who was really vocal about, okay, well, what does this mean for whatever questions he was asking, right? The industry at large, monetization, how does it work with going back and forth to the hosting providers? And I don't think it was really a set of questions that YouTube was expecting to be asked in that moment. And you could really tell that Todd wasn't coming from a point of gotcha. He was coming from a point more of these are considerations that need to be thought of for the entire podcasting ecosystem. And it really, to me, in that moment, it was through like 100 of us being on a virtual Zoom call on YouTube. But it really spoke to the deep thought that he gave to these issues in the podcasting industry. And it's something that for me over the years, meeting him at conferences and just having these conversations, it was always just like, he's somebody that will continue to be truly missed. And I know that we're talking about Todd right now. We're talking about how hard it was to lose someone within the industry. And I really want to pivot the conversation a little bit back to, some of the things that we've continued to do as a show and just, again, be transparent with the people listening about what does it take to run a show like PodBiz? What does it take to get episodes out weekly? What are all the things that are behind the scenes, right, that you don't see? Because you brought up we had to pivot our entire episode schedule to, be able to release our Todd Cochrane tribute episode. I think just talking transparently about some of the hard things about being a podcaster, it's things that all of right? You on the other side of this camera or on the other side of these headphones here. Being the consistency is always one of the hardest things, right? We don't record an episode each week. Sometimes we'll record 3, 4, 5 episodes. Sometimes we'll record one. It's all dependent on Norma Jean's schedule and the schedule of the guests. And, there's a lot that goes into that. It's not just release an audio episode and a video episode. The boys at Lean and Loaf do great work at sending us the episodes since we've lined up the sponsorship with them. But it's sometimes, there's a lot. There's episode art. There's getting things out to media so that we can have coverage of it, of which we're always grateful. There's social media clips that we create. There's newsletter content. There's a lot of things that go into running a podcast where it's like the industry says, right? You record an hour of a show and then you spend 2 to 3 hours working on the episode.
Oh, yeah.
And
easily.
I think those are things that, they're probably not a shock to anybody who's in the industry. They're not a shock to you who's probably editing or creating your own episode. But these are definitely some things that are more like, hey, the hardships of running a show is just being consistent.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think it's something where we did not plan for sponsorship in the first year. We were both shocked, I think, at the success of the show. So in terms of some of the wins that we've had, I mean, just incredible, right? We've been featured in Pod News. We've been featured in Sounds Profitable. I believe
Forbes.
We've been featured Forbes. That's right. Forbes, just casually throw that in there, John. I mean, for everybody who works in podcasting or has a podcast, try and explain it to your boomer parents and good luck. But if you tell them you're featured in Forbes, they kind of understand a little bit better. So big thanks to Frank, who's been writing all about the podcasting industry there.
Over at Earworthy, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, we've been featured in, I believe, Earworthy as well. We've had quite a lot of press coverage, which has been great because I think there really is a demand for having these transparent conversations around monetization, right? Who on the indie side, who on the big brand ad side, who on the sponsorship side, who on the creator monetization side. So that's been incredible, I think, in a lot of ways.
And, the thing is with us being in the industry, and one thing in my post-platform life that I really wanted to do in running my company, the Podhouse Productions, and you running NJB Media, is I wanted to be able to say, you know what? it's easy to talk from a platform side. It's easy to talk from a company side about, hey, here are the things you're supposed to do, right? But I think that starting this show and being able to have a professionally run show where it's like, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to release here, this is how we're going to do it. One of those things is you're talking to people that are actively running a show, that are also giving advice in their independent companies, Norma Jean's and mine, about what's expected of a podcaster from experience.
Yeah.
And then we have people on the show who are in the industry who are giving real hard advice, right? And I think that there's something important for the guitar player who makes guitars being a guitar player telling you how to play guitar, right? I think that there's very much something in that, being able to be like, hey, I'm in this with you. This is my experience. This is what works for me. And this is what the industry at large is about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think John and I are both very clearly in the trenches. John very much on the production side and doing a lot of branded B2B stuff, me on audience development. I don't even think people know what I do when I say audience development, John. I really don't. What does it mean?
I think what we've said is, depending on the hour that you ask us, we'll tell you exactly what we do.
Yeah. It's very, very interesting. I think mostly what I do is consulting for branded podcasts. So I tell them what their numbers are doing and how to grow their show organically and with paid campaigns. So for anybody who wants to know more about John's, B2B and my audience development, that is what we do outside of PodBiz. We really do actively work in the industry and love it. And it's something where I think also we've gotten to advocate for what we want to see highlighted in the podcasting industry. And we've gotten support. I want to talk about our sponsorship, John. We got sponsored.
How crazy is that?
How crazy is that? We did not plan that at all. We were like, okay, let's get to a year. Let's see if we still are friends and want to make this show. Let's see if we still like each other as people and don't hate each other. And maybe we'll keep going. Maybe we'll get a sponsor. Let's think about it. Let's get to year one. And the show has gotten such great response. Lean and Loaf actually reached out to us because of the work that we're doing. And to be honest, that's how we've gotten a lot of these press features. That's how we got into Forbes. You were able to create communication and emails that go out to press every week about the highlights of the episode and the guest takeaways and why they're important and why it's important for the overall industry. So I think it's one of those things where when you're thinking about, how am I going to grow my show? You don't always see how everything is connected in this synergistic relationship, right? And so when we say, okay, we got a sponsor, that means that they took a lot of that all of our post-production off of our plate. So, and John and I both have these wide skill sets. So we were like, great, John, you can do these other things that none of us have bandwidth for because we're all doing 12 things at once.
Right.
And so because of that, that's how we've gotten, even more of an impact to share even more transparent conversations around monetization. And it's definitely something where it's enabled us to grow the show even further. And I definitely never thought that about sponsorship previously. I only ever thought, okay, great, we'll have some money for more stuff or we'll have some gear. But it never occurred to me that we would have bandwidth. And I think for everybody out there who's like, sponsorship would be cool and it'd be great to make money for my show. Yes, but it's also that you can continue to grow the show, right? It gives you more resource to put back into the work that you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's a lot to be said for that. For year one, for a show to have sponsors like ours I'm just always so grateful.
Mind blown emoji. Mind blown emoji.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we are open for sponsorships as well. So if you're listening to this and are looking to grow even more awareness, feel free to drop us a line. Our information is in the show notes or the YouTube description, wherever you're listening or watching, ladies and gentlemen.
You'll see our other sponsors. And John's done a really great job with that. I think we both have sales and sponsorship experience. And John just really kind of took the reins and was like, hey, how do we provide value for people who want to support the work we're doing? So that's been fantastic.
And I think I want to underline that quote that you just said, support the work we're doing, because I think that's been a big proponent of what we're doing here, right? Is we're really trying to leave the industry better than when we got here. And I think that there's a lot of people in the industry who it's a very similar thing, right? And so for us to be able to have our first sponsor and be able to be gaining traction on that and be able to say, you know what, they see the vision and they want to support the work we're doing. I think that, again, that can only make a person grateful for the fact that they see what we see too. And, for those who are out there who are looking into sponsorships and saying, hey, how can I get that for my show? I always say this to everybody that asks me. I've been saying this for almost 10 years now. Never be afraid of your numbers. Never be afraid of your metrics. And always go in never expect anything, ask for everything, and then be grateful with the landing spot and the results, right?
Yeah.
Because you never know. The fact that you have a media kit that shows your numbers and shows your reach and shows the things that you've done, and the fact that you really know what your show is about, the sky's the limit for what your show can do. Maybe there is more opportunity for growth for you to get where you want to get. Maybe you're right where you need to be and you don't even know it. So I think that there's a lot of value in being able to say, you know what, like really try to make your show work for you. There's nothing wrong with that. And, for us, I think that was a big thing in year one was, what is our value add? What are we offering people? What are we offering our listeners? And what are we offering potential brands who want to work with us?
Yeah.
And I think in all those ways, we really came up with, here's what it looks like. And thank you to the boys in Lean and Low for being the first and not the last, but thank you for being the first.
No, we have some really exciting sponsorship announcements coming up in year 2. And of course, thank you to Lean and Low. But if they hadn't reached out and said, hey, we really want to support the work you guys are doing, we wouldn't have thought that, right? We wouldn't have gone in that direction. And of course, it's one of those things where we encourage everyone to go after sponsorship. But we thought, okay, we'll give it a year first. But we just feel really fortunate that everybody has been so receptive and supportive of the work that we're doing. I just want to go over a quick rundown of the guests that we've had, right? We've mentioned Todd Cochrane. We mentioned a couple other ad folks. But let's just start. Our first batch of episodes was Danielle Bezalel. It was Millie Boats from Acast, and it was James Cridland.
How crazy is that?
We decided to launch with 3 episodes because we really thought, okay, we want to have somebody who's speaking from an industry perspective. We wanted to have somebody who's speaking from a platform perspective, and we wanted to have somebody who was speaking as an independent creator. And it's been really great to know that we have that balance from day one. After that, we've just had great names. Mark Asquith from Captivate, Stevie Manns at BlackRock, Molly Demelier, who at the time was at Sundays and now is with Sounds Profitable. Adam McNeil, we mentioned, Heather Osgood, Greg Wasserman at RSS.com, Jeff Umbro.
By the way, everybody loves Greg.
Everybody loves Greg.
Everybody loves Greg.
Greg is the Captain America. Greg is the Captain America of podcasting. Greg, shout out Greg. We love you. Jeff Umbro, Podglomerate. We missed you at the podcast show London. Brian Barletta, obviously, Sounds Profitable. And now with Podcast Movement, we're so excited about what they're doing. And, it's really great to live in these times where our entire industry is evolving and we're getting to see interesting and exciting things there. Gordon Firemark, right? The podcast lawyer. Alice Florence Orr from Podcast Review. She's been doing incredible things. Randy Poole, owner of People Media, who we've worked with for years, who we love. We've had Giancarlo, like I mentioned, Andrew Weiss from Podfest, Dan Meisner from Bumper, which has just made their dashboard public. They're doing some really great things. Matt Kundle, founder of Sound Off Media. I was actually on their podcast, which was really fun. You've got to check out that episode to hear a little bit of my lore. Jack Levy from Table Read. That was an incredible conversation. And what he's built is incredible. It's a bunch of actors, a lot of well-known Emmy-winning actors in Los Angeles reading a script every single week. Just phenomenal show. Ariel Nissenblatt, who we know and love. She was just inducted into the Podcast Hall of Fame. Veronica Taylor from Acast, who's their SVP of content. Aaron McGregor, who was with Air at the time and really spoke to their rate guide. They produce a rate guide every year. So if you don't know how much a job should pay, check it out. It's free. It's on their website. Laura Joyce Davis, managing editor at Stanford Storytelling Project. Andrea Koskai, founder of Eurowaves. And she is just doing incredible work in Europe and building community here. She also makes great shows, markets great shows. Patrick Hill, founder and CEO of Disktopia. Obviously, Todd, who we mentioned. Colin Anderson from Play and Record. He created Office Ladies, just phenomenal work. James Cridland, obviously, as we mentioned, has been a huge supporter of the show from day one. And we love Pod News. It really is the New York Times of podcasting. And, what James has done for the industry is incredible. Alberto Vitella from RSS.com. He's been fantastic. We love RSS.com. They're doing some great stuff. Victoria King-Meyer, who we mentioned. Danielle Corbett from The Thought Card and Road Trip Ready. Sarah Toperoff from Disco by Headliner. She's doing phenomenal work as well. Jeremy Enns from Podcast Marketing Academy. Michael Osborne from 14th Street Studios. And I really liked his episode as well because he talked about getting picked up by a network. He's done stuff with PRX. He's done stuff with Wondery. He's done stuff with Smithsonian, and some of his shows he made for 2 or 3 years before they got picked up by a network. And he really talks about what it's like on that journey. I thought that was super valuable for indie creators. Michelle Jackson, founder of Creators Getting Paid. Dane Cardiel of Good Tape. That was so fun. He and Stella Young, who was on just a couple of weeks ago, have a new podcast, This is TV Now. Big shout out there. Katrin Skippertis, who's the audience and marketing development director for the Podcast Guys. We had Rox Codes on, co-founder and CEO of Flightcast. Carly Baker, who's the head of media partnerships at the HubSpot Media Network, who does incredible shows for their HubSpot user base and audience. Really, really cool if you're into like CRMs and B2B and all of that kind of stuff, which, from a business standpoint and thought leadership, they've done an incredible job. Courtney O'Connor from Oxford Road. We had Oxford Road on. They're like the largest audio agency in the world. And she's the director of podcast media. Like, that was huge. Chris Stone, who has an incredible weekly email newsletter that goes out and founded something called the Podcast Crew, which is where, people can learn to find different contractors and learn about the list that he's cultivating. We had Brendan Monahan, CEO and president of Libsyn. That was a really big one, hearing about their journey. I mean, they've been a podcast host for over 20 years. They had their 20-year anniversary a couple of years ago. They're doing phenomenal work, and they really support independent creators, which has been so cool to see. Sam Sethi, CEO of True Fans. We love Sam. Sam and James Cridlin also host the Pod News Weekly Review, which we know and love and have been featured on. It's a great show. It's, I think, they say one, but it's sometimes up to 2 hours every Friday. And you really get the week-long industry tea. So it's definitely worth listening to. Dan Kendall, founder of the Health Podcast Library. Tom Webster, Joe Fusigna, who came on, creator membership. Tom, of course, is with Sounds Profitable, and he's just so deep into research. We talked about when YouTube became the #1 podcast discovery platform. That was really a phenomenal episode. Sean Howard from FlightPath talking about ad inventory and predictability. That was so cool. Rodrigo Tigre coming on talking about the Latin American market and how it's going to surpass the English-speaking market or the US market pretty soon. Yes. Nigel Eaton, Type C Studios. She's worked at Netflix, Apple, Wondery, just incredible. Jim Ballas from Magellan. We've just had incredible guests. Liam Heffernan was just on. Rebecca Dalby from Triton. Just incredible guests. We're so lucky. And we've got so many more that I haven't mentioned that haven't come out yet. So year 2, we're even more excited, right? We've got more partnerships coming in, both on the media side, on the event side, on the sponsorship side. And we have some really exciting episodes. I don't want to reveal anything because things can always pivot. I think we learned that pretty early on, but we've got great episodes coming out with more big creators, with more big ad folks, with more big platform folks, with more big subscription folks. And we're really excited about the direction that, #1, the industry is going in terms of monetization, the creator economy is going in, and PodBiz is going in.
Yeah, and I just want to say once again, thank you guys for all the support too. I know that we're very excited for the list of people that have come on and supported the show and gave you, the listener, lots of great information about where the money is in podcasting, right? But I really am excited for year 2, year 3, year 4, but we've got a lot of really exciting news coming up, a lot of really great things happening. And I just want to thank you guys again for all the support and all the love for it. It takes a lot to put together a show like this, as many of you in the audience know, and just being able to put it together and have really great feedback from you guys, it can't be understated. So thank you guys so much for all the support. Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you all so much for the support. And John, last question. Where's the money in podcasting?
The money in podcasting is all over. The money in podcasting is in knowing your audience, knowing your niche. It's in advertising. It's in memberships. There's so many different ways to make money with your podcast. And listen to PodBiz and listen to the pros do it. And you'll be able to hear even more on how.
Thanks for joining us for year 1. It's been a real treat, and we look forward to many more.